What's up, everybody? We're here to talk about Pokemon Warpath reviews. I know we kind of glossed over this on the last one, but I think we only had like one review last time, so just I'm sorry if this sounds cold, but it just didn't seem like it was worth the effort to set up for the video. But we got a few this time, so we'll go, and a couple of them are pretty decent length, so we'll go ahead and get to all of that. Basically, in summation of Chapter 5, I believe it was Joe Clone who was basically saying that he really enjoyed the chapter, and him being part of the podcast, he was able to already articulate what he thought of it. So.
All right. Awesome. So we'll start with Joe Clone.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed this chapter. I kind of find it cute that Oichi is scared of thunderstorms. Her reason makes it very tragic, though. Although they are engaged, my immense giddiness went into hyper mode when Oichi started alluding to her romantic feelings toward Keihatsu. And then she kissed him, and then he proposed. I was such a sucker for that. Oh, man, we got a hopeless romantic on our hands.
Oh,
I love
man.
it. Do you think that just because I missed the Bionicle Mask names you referenced that I would gloss over those SAO references in Montanari's family? Lifa? Ronier?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ronier, I saw those immediately.
For context, Ronier is the name of so in the Underworld arc, when Yujiro and Kirito have graduated, they get their own apprentices.
Yeah.
Ronier is the name of Kirito's apprentice.
Okie doke. Sorry. All right. I lost my spot. Cute Easter eggs. If
Ari.
Ari is also a reference, then you'll have to tell me, because that name sounds too common to my ears.
That one's not a reference. It's literally a name that I picked out of my head.
Assassination attempt. Lord Keihatsu brought to his knees by a child on the street. Attempted killer locked up. Trial. Banishment. Oh, that sequence was fire. You said Yarsha or Jarsha. I see. I went with how you pronounced it, not spelled it.
Yeah, I did pronounce. I don't know why I pronounced it with the Y. That's something that I kind of picked up from some of my friends in Spain. They pronounce their J's as Y's.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that came to me at that moment, but once I started going with it, I was just like, all right, this is how we're doing it now.
That's interesting that it's Y's in Spain, because it's H's in Mexico.
Yeah, so when I was over in Spain, they called me Joseph.
Oh.
Which is kind of interesting. Which is similar to how they say it in Hebrew. They say in Hebrew they don't say Joseph, they say Yosef.
Yeah.
Or Yusuf.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Because and then like around here it's Ose, because it's with an H instead of a Y. That's
I don't know where the differentiation came from. The first couple times it weirded me out, and then I was like, okay, this is just how they do it.
Oh yeah. All right. Interesting. All right. Yarsha or. Yeah, we'll be back someday. I sincerely hope he takes Keihatsu's advice and bonds with the Pokemon. My prediction, my hope, is that when the time comes, Keihatsu gets impressed by Yarsha's improvement and they become rivals in a classic Pokemon. Classic Pokemon. And whatever Pokemon bonds with Yarsha, I will know or be taught the move Revenge. So this theory narrows down which Pokemon it could be, plus the fact that you're only using up to Gen 5.
I don't dislike that idea.
The rallying scene was great. Keihatsu made a powerful speech and surprise Jigglypuff appearance. So you said you'd upload a short mini chapter to the Discord server about how Oichi got her.
I'm still working on that. I thought I was going to have it done by now, but I've been sick the last week, and even before that.
It's just been a crazy month.
It's always crazy with us.
It's always crazy.
When was the last time there wasn't crazy
Life
stuff
is just
happening
crazy,
with us? Yeah.
I assume getting closer to Keihatsu this chapter, inspired her to get a better grip on her self-image.
It's helping her move in that direction.
That seems to me what she meant by what she said here. She definitely leveled up to a higher place than she initially thought she could achieve because of her best friend Keihatsu. And Jigglypuff is proof I can read. See you next time, Mataris. Deo Ecclesiae Patriae.
Deo Ecclesiae
All right.
Thank you for the review, Joe Clone.
Next, De Silver Septile.
I think this one's new.
Okay.
All right, cool. Welcome to Silver Septile.
See, I see silver and I automatically think the other silver. I think this might be a different reviewer.
Yeah.
So just wanted to say that I love the story already. It's hard to find good Pokemon Conquest fics that aren't one-shots.
I tried to find some Pokemon Conquest fictions, like, kind of to get a feel for, like, what might already be, well received. I couldn't really find any.
I particularly liked the little bits of culture you've added to each of the kingdoms, like the battle cries at the end.
Yeah, so thank my wife for reading the Silmarillion and helping me understand that that countries should be more than just places on a map if you want them to be believable in the context of fiction. Just as much as real life, they need to have culture and history behind them.
I love it. I can't wait to see how you implement the traps and the mechanics of the arenas, though.
Ooh, yes, that's. I've got some fun. I have some fun ideas for that. That's gonna be fun.
Really liking the interaction between the characters, though, and seeing how they've fleshed out more.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think I mentioned this, like, during, like, the first or second podcast for this series. Like, I feel as though there was a lot of opportunity for, like, character interactions between the warlords, kind of like how they do in the Fire Emblem series, and it just didn't happen. And I can kind of understand it because, like, this is like Pokemon, so like Fire Emblem, definitely not a kid's game. It's more for teenagers, young adults type of thing. So I feel like I would certainly appreciate that kind of thing. Like, even as a younger kid, like, I was always more into bigger stories and all that. But I also understand that I'm kind of the exception to that.
Yeah.
It would be cool and would be something great to go back on, as you get older, but for kids, the target audience, it would probably just be a lot of wasted effort. So, unfortunate as it is, I can see why they didn't do that. But yeah, that's one of the beauties of fan fiction. We get to make the stuff that we get to make the stuff that we didn't see happen. We get to make it happen for ourselves and for other people.
Well, thank you, De Silver Septile.
Yep. And this one's your favorite.
Silikita?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Hey, bud. All right. Sorry, I guess I slept on this story for a minute. Hope you guys are ready for a mini essay of a review. Always. All right. In Chapter 5...
we are getting Chapter 5 for this.
In Chapter 5, we got our first look at Warlord versus Warlord action, which had a few changes in the mass battle you showed us in Chapter 3. It was interesting to see how Keihatsu was able to plan according to the more individual strengths and weaknesses of each Pokemon, as opposed to the strategy of numbers involved in the larger conflict.
So, believe it or not, I actually had to keep myself from doing that in Chapter 3. Like, I was all ready to get, like, into all the technical details of, like, okay, this Pokemon will match up well against this type, and this one will do this, and this. And I'm like, I'm literally going to be doing this for hundreds of Pokemon. I better stop. So I had to go and kind of restructure how I was gonna plan that. I had to make I had to make it so that it was either from first person point of view or from a larger perspective. It's like you can either be paying attention to one facet, or you have to be looking at the whole thing. Like, on a battle scale that big, there's really no way to do the in between without it being really boring.
Takanobu chomping at the bit whenever he feels like his master has been insulted in some capacity is beginning to become amusing running gag for me. I was hoping to get to see a little more action from Nashige and his Pokemon. Sorry, guys. I listen to him read. I never actually see the written text, so this is why funny. I'm slow. Since Keihatsu seems to hold them in such high esteem with regards to the battle prowess. But my guess is that you're saving that for something later on.
Yeah. Without giving spoilers, yeah. I'm saving them for something.
Oichi and Keihatsu being cute was very cute. But I can also see the greater importance of her standing with him even during a mock battle. If she's such a pacifist, it speaks a lot as to how highly she must value Keihatsu's trust that she would do what she could to keep earning her place by his side and participate in that kind of event, even vicariously. Their dynamic is one that I look forward to watching unfold because it's not just about them becoming closer as a pairing, but how it's going to affect Keihatsu's ability to rule. Because good or ill, it's inevitable that their relationship will affect this mindset.
You're not wrong.
I wonder how she's going to affect the way that he runs the country in the long run.
You'll have to keep reading to find out.
Back to Aurora versus Fontaine fight. I like how you more or less allowed Keihatsu to win by having Motochika handicap his warriors. I feel like he genuinely won their individual skirmish via the element of surprise, but it makes sense that even Motochika is as brash as everyone says he is. He would be incredibly unlikely to lose out to someone who's been doing warlord gig for significantly less time than him.
Yeah. Yeah, if it was just Keihatsu and Motochika, Keihatsu would have won, because he thought a little faster than Motochika.
Yeah.
But in terms of their squad conflict, if Motochika had sent in the full force of his Pokemon with their warriors, he would have swept them.
Yeah. Motochika has obviously been successful in ruling his kingdom for some time, and with the way these people seem to do their politics, he has to be at least competent at getting his troops to work well together. Even if Keihatsu has been raised for this lifestyle, there's something to be said for reading theories and historical events as opposed to being in a conflict oneself. At least, I'm assuming. I've never been in a fight myself, so I can't really speak from experience.
Yeah, speaking as someone who has been in a fight, there's absolutely a difference. There is 100% a difference.
I have to say, I'm looking forward to more interactions between the three warlords. They all seem to work very well off of each other, so I can only imagine what they'll be like when they're on the same side of the battlefield. That and their conversations are never boring, despite consisting of what can be considered incredibly boring content.
Fair enough. Yeah, like I'm going out of my way to make sure that their dynamic flows together very easily, because when they're together, like we see this most with Keihatsu, and we might get a little bit more into it with the other warlords, but that feeling that he has of like not being able to, just be with people on equal footing and just talk to them as people. That's reflected in that's like Motochika and Motonari have also had moments like that where and like because they're all on the same standing in terms of society, it is one of the very few occasions where they can just speak freely. Like in a they have their formal way of speaking when they're in front of other people, but when they're just the three of them, I'm really trying to make it so that they are just they're for lack of a better term, they're three dudes hanging out.
Yeah.
They have a common goal. They want to work toward that. Like, they have to be the kings in front of their nations, but at the same time they are very human, and each of them on some level desires that kind of interaction. For Motonari, he has his wife, and so it's not quite to the same level for him. Motochika's by himself. Now Keihatsu's got Oichi coming closer to him, but it's still not quite the same. So I'm glad that their interactions are standing out in this capacity to the reader.
The scene with him dragging his feet about the draft was an interesting one. It kind of sucks because the narrative has made it clear that this has to happen if they're going to have the numbers necessary to win, but he obviously dislikes the idea of turning citizens into soldiers. I like that you didn't make him agonize over it for a ridiculous amount of time, but you also didn't make his attitude do a full 180 on the matter once he decided on his course of action. He knew what needed to be done, and he did it, but without liking it or without being a brat about it. He probably could have been.
You're not wrong.
It's an interesting tightrope you have him walking, but it seems to be well balanced.
Yeah, like you said, it is a tightrope, because again, I'm having him as the role of the servant king, and to him, forcing his citizens to partake of this is an anathema, but he also knows that if he doesn't, they're all gonna die anyways. So it's literally come to a point where it's like, okay, do I send some of my people to die, or do I wait for Ignis to finally get his crap together and just come in and kill even more of them? which is, like, not to say that he wants to do it, but he's realist enough to know that this is how it has to be.
There's a Nakarui in this universe. Gimme. Bring out the sassy boy.
It's not the same. Not the same.
Him. He just
not the same.
He recycled the name.
I recycled the name. It's not the same guy.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I know how much you guys love. I know how much you guys love him, but nah. There's only one Akurui Hogosha. There can be only one.
I'm starting to wonder if Keihatsu doesn't have a thing for the cute nurse shtick, considering how often he waits until it's Oichi being the one to examine and treat his wounds.
I mean, I didn't write him that way, but I mean, maybe.
So Hideyoshi is just straight up dumb. Interesting. Although I do have to wonder if this isn't some front that he's putting up just to make people underestimate him. Though I do wonder what the point of exasperating his own advisors with that kind of behavior would really accomplish. I really can't tell. You've pulled too many fast ones for me to take this guy at face value.
Interesting.
Chapter 6. The opening discussion had me hooked, seeing the people who are technically allies but clearly don't get along very well with one another. It came as a real surprise, especially after seeing how well all of the warlords get along. I almost wondered if the advisors were the only ones to not get along, but it's implied later on in the chapter that this seems to be a cultural thing. In that case, I now find myself wondering how it is that Montanari and Motochika get along so well. Did something happen with the two of them at some point, or do they just know that it's better for both of their countries for them to get along as individuals? I feel like there's a bigger story here, and I hope that we get to learn about it at some point down the line.
That's an interesting thought. I'll address that second point some other time. Right now, I'll focus on the part about how the dignitaries don't get along, even though the world leaders do. This comes somewhat from my own experience, and I'm not going to name countries or people, but it was interesting for me to see how, even though relations between certain countries were strained, I myself...
You know this because you were the child of an ambassador.
Yeah, sorry. So, as I've mentioned, I went to school overseas. I was literally I wasn't the child of the ambassador, but dignitary, you could say. Yes. My father was the Air Force representative for our country while we were in Australia, is basically how that goes. And as such, I went to a school where there were a lot of diplomats' kids, people from all over the world. About 1/3 of the total student populations were diplomat kids. And this is a school of this is a school of about 2,500 students.
Dang.
Well, it goes K through 12.
Yeah, but that's a lot.
But yeah, it's a lot of students. So about 800 something of those students were diplomat kids. So there's a lot of coming across people from other countries. Some of them were people from countries that the United States had good relations with, and those kids were just the worst. And I did not like hanging out with them, and I really had as little to do with them as I could.
Wow.
Then there were kids from countries who it's like, our countries are kind of just pointing nukes at each other and waiting for the other person to hit the red button first. And I got on great with those kids. And we had different religious ideologies and very different cultural backgrounds. But we were able to talk as friends.
It came down to personality.
It did come down to personality. Well, it also came down to us being able to just realize that, hey, this is a person. I can talk to them.
Yeah, just being open-minded when you're meeting other human beings.
Yeah. It was like, and of course, there was some of the same where it's like, there's a country we don't like. I definitely didn't like those kids. There were countries we did like. My friends from Britain, I got on great with them. I got to go see them a few years ago, shortly before we got married. That was a great trip. I really enjoyed that. So there was a little bit of everything, but to tie it into this story, it was like, in a narrative sense, there has to be obstacles, right? I can't have everything going too smoothly for the good guys. So this seemed like a natural place to kind of start including some friction among the allies, because you can believe that every time there's a coalition of multiple nations involving an invading force,
Yeah.
there's gonna be people stepping on each other's toes. Sometimes it's in having the best intentions, and some people try to get ahead of each other, and then it turns into something nasty, or it's just nasty to start with.
And then these guys are also like, they don't have front row seats to the personalities either. All they know is their preconceived notions of the policies of these countries or the cultures of these countries, and they haven't really spent time with the people, so they're just kind of coming in with their guard up, thinking, oh, these Fontanians, you know,
these mud squatters.
Yeah, basically.
These snobby tea snobs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they're already gonna be coming in kind of with their hackles up because the people are different and they're not ready.
Yep. So. And then you just got Keihatsu there with like a broken shoulder, just being like, I'm so done with all of you people.
I feel like Keihatsu and Takanobu kind of I feel like Keihatsu did Takanobu kind of dirty with the Snorlax bit. Don't get me wrong, it was hilarious, but what did the poor guy do to deserve that? Is he just an easy target, or did he do something specific?
He's an easy target. There's it's nothing personal. He's just easy to get a rise out of for Keihatsu.
Gotta say, the stabbing scene really took me aback on multiple counts. I didn't really think about how Keihatsu's actions could come back to bite him from Ignis, or at least I didn't really think it would become a factor until they actually made it to Ignis. I also didn't expect it to come from a literal child. It definitely makes sense that it happens the way that it has. And maybe that's on me for not seeing it coming, but it still really caught me off guard.
Yeah, again, to the point that like I can't have things have come together smoothly for the good guys so far. Narrative-wise, there has to be some friction, but yes, there also needs to be like Keihatsu has done the right thing at this point. But when you have stakes this high, there's always going to be repercussions or consequences to some degree that ripple back to you. Like it doesn't matter that he did the right thing in the grand scheme of things. There were still casualties, and someone has to answer for those.
I don't know if this counts as a character development, but it was good to see Keihatsu get some flack from his advisors without him dismissing them for it. Like, he tended to go with...
he tended to do with Tsunehisa.
He tended to do with...
Tsunehisa.
Okay. I don't know what that means.
He was the old dude that Keihatsu got rid of because he wasn't...
like he tended to do with Tsunehisa. Sorry. My brain did not compute. More than that, he's actually listening to them, which is a lot of young protagonists, I'm going to let you finish.
Okay, yeah. Which a lot of young adult protagonists with or in positions of power tend not to do. Maybe he's done this before, but we haven't really seen it, so this was a welcome change to the narrative. Yeah, if Naoshige in particular is telling him off for something, odds are more likely that he's going to listen. And there is a reason for that, and we'll get to that later on in the story, but Takanobu's more verbal about his displeasure, but if you pay attention to it, you'll notice that when Naoshige is the one who's speaking, he really starts listening.
Okay.
Like he's not ignoring Takanobu, but if you pay attention to like the way that he carries himself and the way that he speaks to them, you can kind of see that Naoshige's got his ear a little bit more.
Okay.
Let's see. The conversation with Oichi was both heartbreaking and soothing, and I'm glad that the end of it left me smiling. I don't know what kind of life she's had to make her think that every bad thing that happens around her is her fault, but it sounds like she needs all the love and support she can get, which Keihatsu seems more than willing to provide. Excuse me. Side note, you're not a big fan of slow burn romances, are you? You seem to prefer that things just get moving with your couples. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of slow burns. I'm not apologizing for that. I'm like, you know what? If there's chemistry and there's mutual interest and there's enough common interests, why dance around it? I don't get it. I don't get it. I'm sure it's at some point I'm going to have to write a slow burn to make myself do it. But it's not today. It's not today. Let's see. Yarsha's sentencing was exceptionally decided and delivered. I do have to wonder if the sisters are really going to just let things go like Keihatsu thinks they will, but I suppose that's to be seen at a later time. I really doubt this is the last we'll hear of Yarsha, so I look forward to seeing how that new subplot pans out. Yeah, man, Chekhov's gun. Can I have Keihatsu as a motivational speaker? I'm ready to jump in and march alongside the rest of the coalition after his speech, and I'll go without a Pokemon to my name. The warlord said it. His ability to give the soldiers a vision to follow without demonizing their opponents was awesome. I feel like history could have avoided a lot of post-war issues if the soldiers were able to see their enemies as humans who have been manipulated by the powers that be, just like them.
See, it's interesting that you say that, because while there's some truth to that, you also hear a lot of stories about soldiers who, when they weren't under orders to open fire on each other, they were just talking to each other. Like literally, like in during World War II.
Was it World War II?
During World War II, in the trenches, they were just passing cigarettes back and forth, swapping. It's like yeah, they sent us with these snacks.
I thought that was World War I.
It was World War II. It was World War II. Okay. There's another story that you're thinking of that's also from World War II, where there was a soldier in Russia who was a very talented singer. Oh, yeah. And he would sing every night. You know, this would go on for several weeks on this particular battlefield. And one day he got sick, and his voice gave out, so they didn't hear. So neither side heard him singing, and the Russian soldiers were trying to keep him warm, trying to do what they could to help him get his throat working again. And I believe it was the Americans or the British who kind of got wind of what was happening, because they threw a package over. And at first the Russians freaked out because they thought it was a bomb. And then, no kaboom, so they go in and send a squad to figure out, like, okay, is this an explosive? Was it a dud? What's happening? And they found it was a care package loaded with, like, tea that would help that would basically act as a lozenge. Yeah. And they were like, is he okay? Like, is there anything else that we can send over? Because they enjoyed his singing too. So you get a lot. It's this really weird dynamic where, like, in the moments where they're not all out to just kill each other, they do know that these are also just people who happen to be on the other side of things. And, like, it could, like, if not for whatever twist of fate or what have you, it could have been the two of them on the same side of the trench against everybody else.
I think that just speaks to how complex human relationships are. And I think there's a real beauty to being able to express that in stories, because I think often, especially young people, we get this very black and white view of the world and relationships, and when it's much more complex than first meets the eye,
Yeah.
And I think especially when you're hearing about, world's events and stuff that's happening in cultures that are far away, it's really easy to just see things in black and white and not see it as a bunch of human beings who are suffering through something, and there's just no easy way to solve it, right? So I think that's something that's really powerful to express through the telling of stories.
Yeah. And to relate this to Keihatsu directly, he doesn't want to go to war. Like, he's, in his mind, he doesn't have anything to prove. Like, he, there is the sense that, he wants to, he wants people to respect him just as much, if not more, than his father. And, his father earned his titles out in the battlefield. That being said, his father never went out to conquer other nations. He earned his reputation by being basically a guy who never let anybody to cross his borders.
Yeah.
And, like, that's what he's known and respected for. Now, like, this is kind of Keihatsu stepping into his own realm of legend, for lack of a better term, at this point, because, like, this is really where he's going to start differentiating himself in the eyes of his followers, because his father never led a campaign to war in another nation. Yeah. Certainly. So one of the previous warlords from Fontaine kept trying to take over Aurora. He wasn't having any of that. That's one of the ways that he earned his reputation for the warrior that he was.
Yeah.
But being that Keihatsu is being forced into this situation, he doesn't want to have it like this. To me, it's important that he and to him it's important that he reminds everybody that, hey, these aren't the bad guys that we're marching against. Yeah, we're marching against one bad guy.
They're people who are being manipulated by a person and his messed up ideology.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is unfortunately the case a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Let's see. Closing comments. Oichi got a Jigglypuff. The coalition marches to war. Things be cooking now. As always, I look forward to the installation in your story, good sir. Happy writing until the next one. That is appreciated. And we'll go ahead and let you listen to the audio chapter, unless you have any closing thoughts about this one.
No. Let's go for it.
Alrighty. We'll catch you guys in a little bit.
Recompense. I want Company 7 in full retreat. Send the flyers to Company 12 to cover them. Yes, my lord. Tell Motochika if he doesn't rein in that battalion on the right flank, I will lodge my foot in his backside. Sir, yes, sir. Takanobu, how's Naoshiga Zenku's battalion? They're advancing steadily, my lord. The advisor lowered his looking glass as he turned to face Keihatsu, who was covered in ash and sweat from the battle that had begun earlier in the day. While we've taken some hard hits to the left advance platoons, most of the injuries inflicted seem to be non-lethal, though reports are still coming in and the battle's not over yet. The two of them were on top of a hill that overlooked the conflict between them and the city that they were trying to take. Snorlax and 5 other Pokemon, plus their warriors, were all stationed in a rough circle around the hill in order to protect their leader on the unlikely event that the enemy forces made it to their position. How long do you estimate before the city's defenses give? The young warlord hissed as he clutched at a burn on his abdomen. Eevee had been on the wrong end of a Houndoom's flames about an hour into the conflict, so both he and Keihatsu had been relegated to the sidelines of the battle, though Vaporeon continued to fight on their behalf alongside Motochika's Samurott. If the battle continues to progress as it has, we should have control of the area by nightfall, my lord. Takanobu answered. I suppose we should be grateful for our swift victories thus far, but I fear we may have grown complacent in our planning because of them. You mean I've grown complacent? Keihatsu chuckled through a grimace. That is not what I meant, my lord. But it's the truth. The younger man sighed. He thought back on the last 5 weeks of battles and travel that the coalition had been through, and how great their successes had seemed. Ignis had very few large cities, instead being divided into many smaller settlements that each had some singular form of commerce to its name. Some were built on mines for coal or gold, while others produced the food needed for their neighbors in exchange for the raw materials necessary for further trade. These settlements had been easily overrun by the combined might of Aurora, Fontaine, and Greenleaf, allowing them to progress swiftly through the Fiery Nation and maintain a high morale among the warriors and Pokemon. As they made their way through the countryside, the leaders strictly forbade their troops from looting, as they were not there to cause trouble for the common folk. They left a few soldiers at each place that they passed through to ensure that no one in the village tried to warn those closer to the capital, but Keihatsu left them with instructions to help the people if they needed it. As a demonstration, he had taken a day to disguise himself as a common warrior among the people of a village that they had took over and helped a struggling family to clear out a pack of Larvesta that were constantly devouring their crops. He revealed himself as the warlord of Aurora after the fact, stunning many of the villagers and emboldening his troops to perform similar acts of kindness after they had left. Of course, not everyone had followed orders so well. Motonari's senior command staff caught wind of some of their warriors stealing from some of the wealthier families in one of the mining towns. In response, the leader of Greenleaf had brought them before a large assembly of the coalition forces, and had then issued a swift and decisive punishment. He had borrowed Motochika's sword, the same one that Keihatsu had gifted him with, and with an unnervingly swift series of strikes, chopped off one hand of each of his men that had been caught with stolen goods, stunning the combined forces. Throughout the entire ordeal, his facial expression remained calm and composed, giving no hint that he was even angry or disappointed, which was all the more unnerving to those under his command. He had then warned the rest of the troops that the same punishment awaited those that were caught stealing from the Ignisians. After that, no one dared to attempt theft from their neighbors again. Other than that, the invasion had progressed quite smoothly. Hideyoshi's warriors had no real chain of command among them, which made those that did resist the coalition forces unable to effectively fight back. That is, until they hit their first major city, a place called Takoro, which was defended by a sturdy outer wall and a garrison of over 600 warriors and Pokemon. The coalition had forces that greatly outnumbered the Ignisian defenses, but their enemies had the home terrain advantage, and for the first time since the invasion had begun, the leaders seemed to have a good grasp on strategy, and it was showing in the casualty reports that Keihatsu and the other warlord leaders had been receiving all day. My lord, no one expects you to... Hold on a moment. Keihatsu said with a frown while raising a hand for silence. He closed his eyes while Takanobu held still and waited for his master's next command. The warlord's mind shifted into the view of Vaporeon, who was growling at a Blaziken and Camerupt that were menacing a trio of Herdier that looked like they had been used as chew toys by the Hound. He sent energy across their link, pouring into Vaporeon to enhance his speed, then ordered the Pokemon to weave around the Houndoom and smack it with an Aqua Tail, followed by a Hydro Pump that blasted both it and its comrade into a muddy ditch where there were a handful of other Fire-type Pokemon being herded. As soon as those two had been deposited by their kin, a Snorlax, not Takanobu's, crashed into them from above, having been dropped by 4 Pidgeot and using Giga Impact in the moment before it struck. The earth around it shook, and any Pokemon unfortunate enough to have been beneath the hefty Pokemon would be lucky to be conscious, if even alive. Satisfied with Vaporeon's efforts for the time being, Keihatsu commanded his partner to make a retreat with the other wounded Pokemon in the company so that he could be seen by Oichi in the healer's ward. She served as his personal healer in an official capacity, but she also tended to some of the more seriously wounded soldiers when she wasn't helping Eevee, Vaporeon, or Keihatsu. The young warlord could feel his tailbone bruising rapidly, as his partner had suffered a crushing bite wound from the Houndoom before his master had intervened. Keihatsu opened his eyes and let out a breath that he hadn't realized he was holding before looking back up at his advisor again. "My apologies for that," he said tiredly. "What were we discussing?" "We were discussing the casualties inflicted by our collective hubris," the older warrior answered. "However, I was also going to say that if you need a respite, the situation seems stable enough for the moment. Lord Motonari is on his way over, so now would be an optimal time to rest your body and visit Lady Oichi for healing. Our troops need their leader to be hale and hearty in time for the final push into the city, after all." Keihatsu raised an eyebrow as he asked, "You're laying it on a tad thick, aren't you?" "Perhaps, but it stems from genuine concern," the other man said with a small smile. "The final decision is yours, of course, but as I said, things are progressing as well as they can for the time being. I will send for you when it is time to take the walls, or if something unexpected rears its head." Keihatsu was tempted to stand on his pride and remain where he was so that he could keep a personal eye on the battle that raged before him, but he knew that he was in for it from his betrothed as it was. She had urged him to try and allow his men to do their jobs when it came to protecting each other, and to save his Pokemon for when a more grave threat arose, but the warrior in him had not been able to heed her caution. He yearned to protect those that he could, and so he had deployed Eevee and Vaporeon almost immediately after some of Greenleaf's Pokemon and warriors began to find themselves overwhelmed by the flames of Ignis, leading to his current wounded status. "Very well," he sighed as he got to his feet a little unsteadily. He allowed Takanobu to assist him when he started to sway with dizziness, and said, "Thank you. 1,000 pardons for becoming a burden." "Not at all, my lord," Takanobu said with another smile. As they started to walk down the hill, he called out, "Munizain, help Lord Keihatsu to the medical division, and be quick about it. Take him to Lady Oichi. She'll look after him." "Sir, yes, sir," the younger warrior acknowledged dutifully as he moved to take his master's weight from his superior. The young capital warrior had volunteered to come on the campaign as one of Keihatsu's battle escorts, apparently feeling the need to make up for allowing an assailant to nearly kill his master right in front of him, despite the warlord already having tried to dismiss the matter. Now the pair of men made their way slowly down the hill, away from the battle zone and toward the medical tents that had been set up outside the line of fire. "So, Munizain," Keihatsu grunted as he nearly rolled his ankle, only catching himself just in time. "How do you like my new choice en route for the afternoon stroll?" "It's much more exciting than our patrols in the capital, my lord," the other warrior answered ruefully. "As glad as I am to be here at your side, I will be much happier to accompany you to Lady Hatsu's fruit stand when we make it back home." Keihatsu asked with a slightly pained grin of his own. "You missed the fruit, or the one who tends to the stall?" "Both," Munizain admitted with a little chuckle. After a moment of quiet walking, he sheepishly added, "Because you have been unable to make your usual trips into the marketplace, I took to visiting her in my off-duty days, and I've been sending her a few letters as we've traveled." Keihatsu regarded the man beside him with approval before saying, "I'm happy for you, Munizain. I hope it turns out well for you." "Thank you, my lord," the other man said with a small dip of his head. "You are far too kind to concern yourselves with the petty matters of myself." "The matters of the heart are many things, but petty is not one of them," his master said with a negative shake of his head. "You're a good man, Munizain, and you deserve to be happy with someone that you care about. Don't ever let anyone tell you differently, understand?" "Yes, my lord," Munizain answered with a significantly happier expression. "Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I deeply appreciate it. And I deeply appreciate the help in getting to the healers," Keihatsu said as the ground beneath them started to level out. "Though God's help me when my physician sees the mess I'm in." "We can always go back to the hilltop with the rest of your war council if you'd like," Munizain said a little cheekily. Keihatsu displayed a strange smile to his subordinate before saying, "You'll have the Lady Oichi to answer to if I go back and extend myself any further than I already have. If you believe yourself brave enough to do so, by all means, let us return." Munezane appeared puzzled by this. "I don't understand," he said. "Everyone speaks of nothing of her but gentle kindness and skills in the medicinal arts. What is to fear about that? My father used to say that a wise man fears the storm he cannot predict." Keihatsu replied, the same smile still on his face. "Lady Oichi has not lost her temper with me yet, but war does strange things to people. I rather think that if she is in fact capable of producing a storm from her anger, it shall be a tempest the likes of which even the Therian Pokémon have never seen." Munezane looked askance at his master, unable to determine whether or not he was telling a joke. Deciding that he'd rather not find out, he simply said, "General Takanobu commanded that I get you to the healer's tents, so I shall. What happens after that is entirely up to you, my lord." Oh, if only that were true. Keihatsu had a slightly apprehensive look on his face as he spoke, which led Munezane to think perhaps he was not jesting. 10 minutes of walking saw Keihatsu in Oichi's tent, where Eevee and Vaporeon were already waiting for him. The water-type Pokemon was being treated by the healer when the two men walked in, so at first she didn't see who had come to visit. "I'll be out to check on the 7th Company in 2 minutes, Kazumusa," she said without looking up. "Please tell the others to have the Celio keep applying cold water to the burn victim's wounds." "Sorry to disturb you, my lady, but your delay may have to be extended," Munezane said, causing Oichi to look over her shoulder, whereupon her eyes widened in surprise. He then continued on to say, "I'd be happy to pass on any other instructions that you have to the other healers, but I'm afraid I will be unable to do much more than that to assist you." "Lieutenant Munezane, Lord Keihatsu," she said as she finished applying a healing salve to Vaporeon's bruised tail. Regarding her betrothed with the practitioner's eyes, she murmured, "If your wounds are anything like what these two suffered, it's a miracle you're able to stand at all. Please, can you help him to sit down on my cot?" She addressed the last part to Keihatsu's guard, who moved to do as she requested. Once the young warlord was on the bedding, Munezane took his leave in order to relay Oichi's instructions to the other healers. "Please also tell Kazumasa to move those with less critical injuries to the south of the camp near the river. If they can walk, we'll need their help to get water to those who cannot." "Understood, my lady," Munezane said with a short bow to the girl. "I'll see it done before I go back to the battlefield." With that gone, the tent flaps quickly rippling back into place. Once he was sure that the other man was gone, Keihatsu shifted his gaze to Oichi, who was sifting through her medical kit, and asked, "How much trouble am I in?" "So much trouble," the girl sighed as she turned toward him with bandages and 2 jars of ointments in her hand. "Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a severe bruise on the tailbone, chest burns and claw wounds in various places?" "Yes," he said as he closed his eyes in preparation for what was about to come. Oichi wasted no time in helping him to get out of his armor and remove his shirt so that she could begin to administer the medicine that he needed. The first few times they had done this, there had been a lot of awkward eye contact and fumbling attempts to get him free of his clothes, but they'd had enough practice by now that it was a fairly smooth operation, though it was still very painful for the young man when his clothes were peeled away from the burnt skin. "I'll have to clean this," Oichi warned him with a slight grimace. "The fabric stuck to the wound long enough that it might cause an infection if I don't get all of the threads out." "Wonderful," the young man said through shut eyes and gritted teeth. "I'll heal it part way so that it doesn't affect your ability to think clearly, but it will still take time to mend properly," she told him as she reached for a fresh washcloth and a gag. She handed him the fabric to jam his teeth so that he did not accidentally bite his own tongue when she started to clean the abused flesh. "As much as I dislike what is about to happen here, I do have to say it's nice to have a few minutes with just the two of us," he said with a pained chuckle, trying to lighten the mood a little bit. "I've hardly seen you this weekend." "You hardly need to go to such lengths to garner my attention," she replied with a slightly softer expression on her face as she set about wetting the fabric that she would be using to clean his body. "I do wish that you would exercise more caution in these battles." "So does my rationale, but my instincts demand that I do otherwise," he replied with a helpless shrug. "I really did try to restrain myself, but one of Montanari's companies was in trouble, and it was faster for me to have Vaporeon and Eevee assist them than waiting for the standard reinforcements, so if I can save a life under my charge, I must do so. Surely you don't fault me for that." "Not as my warlord, no." She sighed as she began to apply a sanitary compound to the soaked cloth. "As my future husband, on the other hand, I know I'm being selfish, but you are the first genuinely good thing to happen to me since I can remember, and I don't want to lose you. You won't, he said with as much conviction as he could muster. I'll always make my way back to you. Granted, I'll likely be battered from head to toe half the time, but I will return as many times as I depart, I promise. So long as you do, she said before glancing at the entrance to her tent. She then gave him a soft kiss that lasted only a second, but it left the both of them smiling when she broke contact. There, she giggled softly, but no more until after you no longer look like you had an argument with a volcano. Keihatsu chortled. I'd win that argument. Maybe, but we'll see how long your tongue holds against this healing session, his betrothed said with a little smile of her own that wiped his clean off. Now get that gag in and hold still for me. This is not going to be pleasant for either of us, so let's try to get it over with as quickly as possible. As Keihatsu stuffed the gag in his mouth and bit down in preparation, he reflected that it was very difficult to win an argument with one's healer, especially when one was completely enamored with said healer. It took about 20 minutes of cleaning and healing before Oichi was finished with her work, and by the end of it she was breathing heavily and trembling with exhaustion. She looked as though she might collapse, so Keihatsu moved quickly to help her sit down in her cot before that could happen. And you lecture me on overextending myself, he said with a kind smile while her cheeks flushed and she averted her gaze. You've been working too hard yourself. Evie and Vaporeon were both fast asleep, resting in the clutches of a true exhaustion that only battle could inflict, leaving the two of them relatively alone together. I suppose we truly are a perfect match then, she said as she leaned on him, her eyes drooping closed. Perhaps I should worry that when we are married we will be so busy attending our respective duties that we will not have enough time for one another. Keihatsu was quiet for a moment before he said, It won't always be like this, not if I can help it. You and I will return to Aurora, where I will spend my days handling nobles and upstart bandits, and you will be free to do as you desire. Then at least we can be certain of our evenings together without wondering if an enemy country is about to come crashing through the borders. Free to do as I please, Oichi murmured as she put her head on his shoulder. I rather think that I'll stay by your side at every possible moment. Even when I am called to fight? He asked curiously. I am here now, aren't I? She responded with a tired laugh. True, he nodded with a grateful smile. Thank you for that. Of course. A thought then occurred to Keihatsu, leading him to say, I'm sorry that I didn't ask this earlier, but where is Jigglypuff? Is she all right? Yes, she's helping the Pokémon of Greenleaf to recover from life-threatening injuries alongside the more experienced healers, she answered. She's amazingly tireless. She sounds like her master, Keihatsu said as he nudged his betrothed gently, causing her to smile again. I am glad that you found a partner to aid in your goal to become a great healer. Oichi had been tending to a sick Pokemon in Aurora's capital hospital when she had come across Jigglypuff, who had fallen ill with a virus that made other healers wary of treating her, for fear of infecting their own partners with the sickness. Since Oichi was one of the few healers who did not possess a bond with a Pokemon, she had taken to caring for the sick creature, a task that took up a good portion of her days leading up to the departure for war. By the time Jigglypuff had been nursed back to good health, Oichi realized that she had become linked to her, a revelation that initially confused and frightened her. She knew that people who could form links to Pokemon were often expected to fight on behalf of their country when called for, and so she feared not only for her new partner, but also herself, as she detested being part of a conflict that would hurt others. She had confessed her fears to Keihatsu, who had been quick to dispel them by reassuring her that he had no intention of making her fight if she did not wish to. Instead, he encouraged her to cherish her bond with Jigglypuff, saying that she had been entrusted with a precious life that now depended on her for strength and guidance. She had cast her doubts on her ability to give strength of any kind to another, but Keihatsu had insisted that she had a resolve as strong as any warrior that he had ever known, given her ability to take charge of the kingdom's negotiations while he had been incapacitated, and her belief in abstaining from conflict in a world so driven by the idea that might made right. He had told her that if she still desired to be a practitioner of medicine, nurturing her link with Jigglypuff would only aid her in that endeavor, as the pink Pokemon was more than capable of learning several healing-type moves that could save the lives of Pokemon, and by extension, their warriors. Her latent ability had been unsealed by her bond with her Pokemon, and allowed her to also use her own energy to heal others. So even if she never set foot on the battlefield herself, she could still help Keihatsu and his cause a great deal. Some of the more experienced medical officers in the army had begun to whisper that she may have had the potential to become a healing sage, the likes of which had not been seen in many years. I suppose it explains why I never had any luck with the Pokemon in Dragnor, she mused. I never considered the thought that I am simply incompatible with Dragon-type Pokemon. However, I rather think that I will count such a thing as a blessing, else I likely never would have come to meet you or her, my wonderful partners who so readily support me almost before I even realize that I have need of it. Just returning the favor, he told her before he kissed the top of her head. I don't recall doing anything worthy of note, Oichi said as she flicked her eyes up toward him. No? Keihatsu grinned a little more brightly. Let's see, where to start? You agreed to accompany me, a stranger, into a border conflict that could have been quite hazardous to your health, not to mention that you volunteered your medical knowledge in order to save many of my people before I could even ask. You also put up with a lot of ridicule from my kingdom's nobility, followed by securing the negotiations to make this coalition possible. Oh, and you've helped me to get well after I've injured myself several times now. As far as I'm concerned, I have much to repay. I feel much the same, and I imagine we could argue about it until the end of our lives without either of us being able to convince the other to concede. Oichi giggled as her eyes slowly drooped closed. I am glad to know that we will have that long together. Her voice drooped to little more than a whisper, and Keihatsu realized that she was falling asleep on his shoulder. Smiling to himself, he moved quietly to lay her head down on the pillow at the edge of the cot, before carefully lifting her legs so that they rested on the bedding where he had been sitting. He noted that the light coming in from the outside was starting to fade, and since they were a couple of weeks' travel away from volcanoes near the capital, the autumn evening could still get chilly in this part of the country. He looked around the tent for the blanket that had been provided for her, but he soon realized that Evie was using it as a nest, and he wasn't about to make his partner get up when he was getting a well-deserved break. He still didn't want to leave her without an extra layer of fabric to ward off the oncoming chill, so he detached his cape from his armor and put it over her small frame as she slumbered. It wasn't a very thick piece of fabric, but it was better than nothing, and she smiled in her sleep when he left it atop her, so he felt that he had made the best choice. He put on his shirt and bracers before picking up his body armor and slipping out of the shelter without a word. As soon as he was outside, he quickly located one of the orderlies that was running messages across the camp and called her over, causing the girl to stop in front of him and bow deeply. How may I serve you, Battlemaster? She asked as she straightened herself up. The young man noted her accent marked her as a resident of Greenleaf before answering. This tent is not to be disturbed under any circumstances except by myself or the Lady Oichi's Jigglypuff. My Pokémon and the good lady are taking a well-deserved rest, and anyone who rouses them early will answer directly to me. Make sure this is known, especially among the healers of this division. As you wish, Lord Keihatsu. The woman gave him one more bow before she rushed off to carry out her new orders, leaving him to walk toward the command pavilion, where he knew he would find the senior staff of the other warlords. His wounds still smarted something fierce, but not to the point where he couldn't get around on his own. He could also think more clearly, which he knew he would need when their forces made the final push to take the walls. He stopped outside the tent next to a pair of his warriors. The standard practice had become to have 2 warriors and their Pokemon from each nation stand guard over the War Council's meeting place, and greeted them by name, causing them to acknowledge his presence with deep bows from the waist. Koda, Matsuda, good to see you both well, he said to the middle-aged warrior and his son. If it's not too much trouble, could you help me into my armor? It's a bit fiddly if I try to do it myself, and last time I wound up with one of my shoulder pads falling off. Of course, my lord, said Matsuda as he took the armor from his master and moved to stand behind him. Your father filled out this set quite nicely in his younger days, back when I was apprenticed to his armor-bearer. It seems to suit you equally well, though it appears to be missing the cape that goes with it. It's gone to someone who has a greater need of it than I, Keihatsu answered as he raised his arms in preparation to be clad in the white and gold armor. I didn't know that you had been in my father's confidence. For 5 years I served as his armor-bearer after my predecessor passed the title on to me, Matsuda said proudly. However, his tone became a little more somber as he continued. I was dismissed of my duties 2 years prior to his death, a shame that I've never been able to rid myself of. Why? Keihatsu asked curiously, causing the 2 men to look at one another nervously. Seeing this, their master said, I assure you no punishment will befall you for speaking the truth. I am not my father, and as far as I am concerned, you have done me no wrong while in my service. I have no reason to hold a grudge against you. The blame lies with me, my lord, Koda blurted out, causing Keihatsu to raise an eyebrow as the young man had been silent thus far. I was caught doing something foolish, and my father tried to shield me from the consequences. Love makes fools of us all, son, but not so much that you should have been punished, Matsuda insisted. Before Keihatsu could try to understand what he was talking about, the older warrior told him, My son became enamored with a truly delightful lass, and he sought to garner her attention. After some trial and error, he succeeded in wooing her, and they declared their intent to marry. I follow you so far, Keihatsu said as Matsuda began to tighten the bindings that held his chest piece with the armor on his back. However, I fail to see how any of this would lead to your dismissal. The girl in question is the Lady Kiko of the Koriyama clan, Matsuda replied, naming the noble house that had a Taurus as their crest. Sir Tsunehisa is the current patriarch, and he strongly discouraged his goddaughter marrying into a lower class. He stated that my service to your father had given my family a sense of entitlement that we were not privy to, and when I protested, he urged your father to maintain the discipline. I was dismissed, and my son has been kept away from her family ever since. Matsuda shrugged and finished by saying, I regret that I could not be by your father's side when he passed into the void, but my duty as a father demanded that I defend my son's honor. As well you should have, Keihatsu said approvingly. To Koda, he asked, Tell me, has Lady Kiko been married off in the time that you have been kept apart? No, sire, but I have heard that she is betrothed to one of the Saratobi heirs. The young man said sadly. I have seen her at a distance a few times, and she looks sad. I know I could make her happy, even if I have no money for a grand hall like her father and grandfather possess. I'll see to it that you get the chance to do so. The young warlord grunted as one of his burns protested the chest piece being clamped against his stomach. Both men paused where they stood, their eyes wide. My lord? Matsuda asked in disbelief. As I'm sure the rumors have told tale, I am not a supporter of the caste system that I inherited from my father, their master told them. A man or woman should be free to choose their spouse, regardless of the circumstances surrounding their birth. After all, I could have been born a commoner because of my mother, were it not for my father, something that people often forget. That being said, I will send a letter to both houses telling them to put the wedding proceedings on hold until my return. I believe the both of you, but I would like the chance to hear Lady Kiko's thoughts on the matter before I interfere any further. I hope that this eases your mind a little, Koda. More than you know, my lord, the young man said as he dropped to his knees and prostrated himself before his master. Thank you. 1,000 years of gratitude from me and my descendants be upon you, my lord. Truly thank you, Matsuda said, his voice sounding a little husky as he spoke. Keihatsu turned to see the older man bowing to him from the waist as he added, A father's greatest wish is to see his children succeed, be that in their own chosen profession or their ability to create a family of their own. Thanks to you, I may yet see that wish fulfilled. It is the duty of the warlord to see to the welfare of his people wherever and whenever he is able. Keihatsu replied as he urged his servants to get up. I would be remiss to ignore a man who has served my family and his nation well, and continues to do so under my rule. Besides, I rather think the nobility of my kingdom could do to be touched upon by those that have experienced the hardships of someone who has worked for success, as opposed to those who have it handed to them merely by right of birth. He chuckled a little bit as he added, A bit hypocritical of me to say, I know, but it is how I feel. And until someone with a greater strength of will than I comes to change things back, my kingdom will advance in the ways that I see fit. Matsuda and Koda swiftly finished tying the last pieces of armor, allowing Keihatsu to move freely once again. Thank you, he said to the happy pair. Now, I have a meeting to attend, but I trust that you will keep us safe while I do. And Matsuda, yes, my lord? Takanobu has been assisting me with my armor for the duration of this campaign, but he has many other duties that he could do to invest a few more minutes in, he said with a little smile as he stood in front of the entrance to the pavilion. If you can find it in yourself to be at my tent an hour before dawn every morning, I think I'll have myself an official armor-bearer. Tears began to pool at the corners of the older man's eyes while his jaw worked up and down, though no sound came out. Seeing this, Keihatsu put his fist over his heart and murmured, Deo ecclesiae patriae. Deo ecclesiae patriae, they echoed with trembling voices. Then he was gone into the tent, his smile even brighter, glad that he had been able to bring happiness to even a few of his citizens in a time of war. The gates to the city were breached not long after the moon had appeared in the sky above Takoro. Keihatsu and Motochiko led the charge personally with their most elite troops, the Regigigas and Kyogre platoons. Both units comprised of 35 warriors each, all of them linked to 2 or more Pokémon. Every one of them were veterans of more than 20 major battles, with the exception of Keihatsu himself, though no one would have guessed as much if not for his youth. Together, the warriors of Fontaine and Aurora drove back the weakened defenses of the Ignisian city and forced them into the main plaza where a statue of the legendary Pokemon Ho-Oh stood gleaming in the firelight of the conflict. It was there that the warriors of Ignis set up to make their last stand, tired and battered though they were. Once Keihatsu and Motochika had them thoroughly surrounded, the leader of the coalition called a halt in their advance. The warriors under his command were confused by the order, as they had the momentum to easily crush the last of the resistance, but no one moved to disobey. He had earned enough of their respect to at least see what he had in mind, even for those not from his homeland. Warriors of Ignis, Keihatsu called out, his powerful voice echoing across the plaza for all to hear. You have fought with honor and valor today. I wish to honor your loyalty to your homeland by offering you a chance to stand down without any further bloodshed. Surrender, and I promise that you will be treated fairly by all standards. No harm will befall you or your Pokémon, nor will I allow ill fortune to befall those whom you have sought to protect. If you wish to fight back, however, I cannot promise to give you safe quarter when all is said and done. This is your only chance to end things with even a small measure of peace. You stand with the blood of our comrades on your hands, and you expect us to roll over and allow you to take our city without a fight that is drawn out to our last breath? Demanded a commander, one of the few officers left standing. Darkrai take you, Auroran! We'll die before allowing you to have Takoro! Wait! Another voice halted Keihatsu before he could give the order to finish the battle. A lieutenant stepped past the commander, who looked furious with his subordinate for speaking out of turn. The man ignored his superior's ire in favor of locking eyes with Keihatsu as he spoke again. I doubt you remember me, Lord Keihatsu, but I remember you. I was part of the battalion that fought your people at the border of our nations, the day that you repelled our attack. You spared the lives of my brethren and our Pokémon partners. The men and women of Ignis began to murmur among themselves with interest. Apparently rumors of Keihatsu's mercy had reached their ears, but now they were seeing it confirmed with their own eyes. The lieutenant went on to say, I detest the idea of allowing you to walk through my home unhindered. But I would hate it even more if another score of my kinsmen died needlessly to the might of your forces. I've fought in many battles on behalf of Takoro and Ignis, and I have never seen strength that equals yours. Therefore I know that any struggling any further will yield no fruit in our favor. You will destroy us, for our masters have urged us to enter the Usuring's lair and bloody its nose without provocation. It is only natural that you retaliate as you have, yet you extend this olive branch to those of us that have survived this long. Turning to face his countrymen, he raised his voice and said, This battle is lost, but this man is better than his word, something I know from personal experience. If he decrees that no harm will befall us or our families, then I believe him. I offer to him my surrender, and I urge you all to do the same. Let us not visit any more sorrow upon our people than this battle already has. Silence! The commander shouted, seeing that many of the people in the square were seriously considering the words of the lieutenant. All of you, your loyalty is to the throne of Ignis. Anything less than a battle on Lord Hideyoshi's behalf is treason, and the perpetrators will be treated as such. The loyalty of a good warrior who loves his homeland is to the people that the throne serves. Keihatsu countered calmly, further angering the leader of the Ignisian forces. If the one who sits on the throne fails to act with the best interests of their people at heart, then the throne may well be empty for all the good that it does its nation. Hideyoshi has visited war upon my homeland as well as that of Greenleaf, all without cause. How has this caused your kingdom to prosper? How has it benefited any of our people? Your current warlord is a cancer that must be removed if there is to be peace and prosperity in this part of Ransai. I am not here to conquer your lands, merely to see that a more temperate ruler makes their way onto the throne, so that there may be peace between our people as it was in the days of my father. I offer you a chance to live to see the rising sun on a time of brotherhood and kindness, sons and daughters of Ignis. Keihatsu then fell silent, waiting to see what their opponent's response would be. It wasn't long in coming. Starting with the lieutenant who had spoken of Keihatsu's mercy, the warriors of Ignis all got on their knees with lowered heads in a gesture of surrender. Those with weapons held them out in front of them and allowed them to fall to the ground, one by one, until only the commander remained standing, shaking and red-faced in fury. You all shame yourselves! He screamed at his troops to no avail. Where is your loyalty? Are you such cowards that you'll surrender to a boy who is still wet behind the ears? Keihatsu guessed that a good number of them were warriors that had been involved in the border conflict, because they seemed to defer to the lieutenant instead of the commander, who seemed to be a warrior dedicated solely to the city. In response to the insults being hurled his way, Keihatsu stepped forward and said, Face my might and battle with your own then. His challenge seemed to catch the other man off guard, but he didn't let up. Furrowing his brow, he added, If you are truly so determined to defend your home to the last breath, then prove your loyalty and send your Pokémon to face mine in single combat. If you value your life and a chance to continue serving your nation, then stand down now. I will not afford you mercy in the heat of battle, and I guarantee you that you and your Pokémon will die if you choose to fight. His words were delivered in a conversational volume and without the slightest hesitation in their delivery, which was far more unsettling than if he had been shouting to assert his claims. In spite of himself, the commander found himself faltering in the face of this invader who was at least 20 years his junior, who gazed at him with eyes of blue fire that pierced through his confidence that had been built over the course of nearly 15 years of battling and rising through the ranks of the Ignisian military. He tried to muster his anger to accept Keihatsu's challenge, but his tongue would not obey his mind, no matter how hard he tried to convey his hatred of the Auroran invader. As if sensing his wavering resolve, Keihatsu then said, "There are two kinds of leaders in this world, Commander. The first lead their troops by example, demonstrating their strength so that those who follow them are inspired to rise past their preconceived limits in order to prove their own worth as warriors. They are the truly strong, the ones who can change the world around them with their actions and ambitions. The second kind hide behind the strength of their troops, relying solely on them to do the hard work for them, and then assuming the credit for their victories, saying that they had the wherewithal to direct the people from a safe standing. They claim that real leadership is given from an elevated view in order to hide the fact that they no longer believe in their own strengths, if they had any to begin with." Keihatsu allowed a slight pause to fill the air before he finished with the words, "I have my own thoughts about which kind you are, but I wonder if you'll confirm them for me." The commander swallowed hard, his throat having become drier than Terrera. None of his troops were standing, and their Pokémon appeared equally passive. If he was going to fight, he and his Typhlosion would do so alone. The seconds trickled by, each one serving to suffocate him with an invisible pressure that was serving to drive him closer and closer to the brink of a complete breakdown. Finally, inevitably, he fell to his knees in front of the young warlord, his energy and will spent. "You win," he said miserably. "You've beaten me at my own game." Motochika laughed derisively at that while their troops moved to restrain the Ignisians, though they were sure not to be rough about it while Keihatsu and his advisors were watching them. "I hate to break the news to you, lava brains," the leader of Fontaine said as his personal escort moved to tie the commander's hands behind his back, "but you shouldn't flatter yourself into thinking you were even a player. You're just an idiot that Hideyoshi used as a puppet." "Motochika, please refrain from setting a bad precedent for the warriors," Keihatsu said in a slightly lowered tone as he turned back to face the water-type warrior. "We've won, and that'll be a sufficient punishment for his ego." "Hey, I'm just saying." Motochika shrugged. "The biggest fools are the fools that follow the loudest fool." As the Ignisian troops began to file past the two men under the guidance of their vanquishers, the lieutenant who had initially spoken in favor of surrendering paused in front of Keihatsu, his face grim. "Consider this recompense for sparing our lives at the border," he said quietly. "Beware those who reside closer to the capital. There are none there who owe you such a debt, and they will fight all the more fiercely for the fear of Lord Hideyoshi's wrath, should they fail to repel your forces." "I will keep that in mind, thank you," Keihatsu said gratefully. "You and your kinsman fought well today, Lieutenant. Take pride in that, despite your loss." The enemy soldier replied. However, he did say, "I'll take some pride in the fact that it took a trio of warlords to bring us to our knees. And I suppose that if I had to concede to anyone, I should be glad that it was you." Done with his piece, he fell into line with the rest of the captured soldiers, his back straight, his head held high. "Nice guy," Motochika snickered. "We should invite him to breakfast." "In all honesty, I would prefer his presence to Sir Kurogiri's first thing in the morning." "Ha!" It took a few days for the coalition to successfully root out any remaining Ignisian soldiers that were in hiding, all of whom were given quarter if they conceded. Then it was a question of how many of their number to leave behind in order to keep the city secured until things were settled in the capital. This was a matter of debate that took the three warlords 2 full days to settle, and it ended with Keihatsu and Motochika each leaving one of their most trusted commanders in charge of the city with a battalion from Aurora and Fontaine each. Keihatsu had wanted the temporary governing force to be comprised of Greenleaf and Fontaine's warriors, but he had been overruled by his peers on the grounds that while the two nations were not outright hostile toward one another, having them work together under such high-stakes job without their direct supervision might be a recipe for conflict and a follow-up disaster. Aurora generally had good relations with both nations, so it seemed a safer measure to have them paired with whoever was left to monitor the situation. Once this matter had been settled, they moved on to planning what city they would take next. There is only one city directly between us and the capital, Motonari was saying as the three of them looked over the maps they had managed to acquire of the country. It's well defended, though if those maps are anything to go by, it is not as large as Takuro, which means that ideally we should be able to capture it with a smaller force than we used here. The real issue is a city that is 3 days' journey to the northwest called Ember Island. This is apparently due to the vast lava moat that surrounds it, and since the foundation of Ignis, no attacking forces ever managed to take it. There are only 3 bridges in and out of the city, so access for even other Ignisians is difficult to acquire. It also has troops and defenses nearly twice that of Takoro, if that gives you any idea of how difficult it would be to conquer it. What does that matter if it's not between us and our goal? Motochika scowled, clearly eager to be on their way for the next battle already. He and Samurott alone had accounted for nearly 100 warriors and their Pokemon in the last battle, stunning many of his allies, Keihatsu included. It was only after seeing him unrestrained in battle that he realized how much the other man had held back during their own mock battle. However, his ferocity and raw strength did not translate well into strategy meetings required of him and his peers. If, for whatever reason, this smaller city is able to hold out for any number of days, or they get word of our advance to send for reinforcements, we would have the strength of 2 cities to deal with, Keihatsu answered as he peered down at the map with a critical eye. I don't think we need to take it over for the sake of the campaign, but it might be dangerous to leave such a potent enemy behind us. On the other hand, their greatest strength is the terrain that surrounds the city, Motonari pointed out. We would be hard-pressed to defeat them, assuming we could, but I doubt that they would send too many troops to attack us in a raid fashion. From what we've seen, each town keeps to itself because there is no central unity or chain of command over them, so the people are forced to defend for themselves. So there's a chance they'll just ignore us, Motochika asked grumpily. I think so, the grass-type warrior answered as he looked at Keihatsu, but ultimately the decision lies with you. I suppose the question we must ask is, which is the greater risk? To leave them be and potentially expose our backs to what may be a very deadly opponent? Or do we try to take them over and certainly lose a good portion of our forces in the process, with not even a good chance at victory? It's true that we could certainly do with a fortified city like that if it turns out the battle with the capital is more difficult than we anticipate. No, Keihatsu said with a negative shake of his head. Not only would we have to deal with the logistics of fighting a distant siege, there would be the local population to consider. I don't like the idea of occupying a city to use it for war purposes if it puts innocents in harm's way. At the same time, a lot of them probably won't want to extend us such mercy. We are invaders, after all. Many of them would want us and our soldiers gone by any means necessary, and I don't want to expose our people to that danger unnecessarily. So what? Motochika asked impatiently. We just leave them alone? I didn't say that. Capital of Ignis, 2 weeks later. Lord Hideyoshi! The master of Ignis turned away from Kanbei and Hanbei to see a messenger dropping to one knee just inside of the doors that led to his throne room. The man then said, Forgive the interruption, sire, but I have dire news to report. Dire? Hideyoshi repeated with a frown. What, is there a volcano eruption imminent and that idiot Kobayasu didn't finish digging the lava trenches like I told him to? I knew he couldn't be trusted to get a job done. No, my lord, the messenger said without moving. Those trenches were dug 2 months ago and inspected by his lordship personally, Kanbei said dryly. They were more than adequate, if memory serves. Oh, right. Hideyoshi remembered a smile then working its way onto his face. Well, then, I doubt that it's very urgent, whatever it is. Tell me whatever it is after dinner tonight. What's the news, messenger? Hanbei asked while yawning sleepily. A coalition comprised of forces from Aurora, Greenleaf, and Fontaine have taken Takoro, and all the lands between it and the border of Lord Keihatsu's nation, the messenger said quickly before the fire-type warlord could countermand his subordinate. They also set up an embargo around Ember Island that the city forces have been unable to break thus far. What? Kanbei asked, his normally grim face looking shocked for once. Are you telling us that Ember Island was actually defeated? No, my lords, the messenger answered, though he kept his eyes focused on the ground in front of him. They are simply unable to send troops out in any sort of fashion, though the city remains occupied by our forces. Wait, Hideyoshi said as he held his hands up with an irritated glare at his junior warlords. First of all, how did this happen? I told you two to take care of Greenleaf and Aurora months ago. Why are they marching in on my country? The forces we were given were not adequate for mounting a proper invasion. Hanbei shrugged, causing Hideyoshi's face to redden with anger. Maybe if you'd listened to Kanbei about drafting the able-bodied people in Pokemon in addition to reassigning troops, we'd have had a chance to get at least a foothold in the southern countries. How dare you! Hideyoshi shouted angrily, his carefree attitude forgotten. First you undermined my own ruling in my own hall, and now you dare to implicate that my designs are flawed? Sure, whatever helps you sleep at night. Hanbei shrugged lazily. Have you ever tried using the imported blossom incense from Greenleaf? Always knocks me right out. As if that requires a great amount of effort, Kanbei said. Shut up, both of you! Hideyoshi shouted. Explain to me how a bookworm, a wild man, and some kid are now marching toward my front door, and how in the distortion zone did they defeat Ember Island? He aimed the last part of his rant at the messenger, who flinched in fear of his master's fiery temper. They collapsed all the bridges that crossed the molten lava moat, my lord, he said in a quavering voice. The warlord sent in elite teams to do the job under the cover of a clouded night. Without them, the city cannot receive supplies, and they cannot send out their troops to aid us if the coalition attacks. And in regards to their advance, they seem to be only 4 days' march from Entei City. Hanbei and Kanbei exchanged a look at this, and it was not a comfortable one. Even the lazy vice warlord seemed surprised at just how close their enemy actually was to their home. With that in mind, Kanbei said to Hideyoshi, My lord, I believe it is time to begin preparations for an assault on the capital. In response, Ignis's warlord turned around and laughed at him. You really believe that this smorgasbord of ragtag warriors can best my kingdom? He asked derisively. You overestimate their chances. They've made it further than any invading force has in nearly a century, Hanbei pointed out. Who is to say that they can't make it all this way? I say, Hideyoshi snapped as he rounded on the younger man. And you will too, if you know what is good for you. Go to Entei and send those tree huggers, swamp squatters, and plain people back to the holes that they crawled out of. And if I don't, Hanbei replied lazily. Hideyoshi stood a handbreadth away from his subordinate and hissed, Then I'll feed you to it. Hanbei's eyes narrowed briefly, but then he stepped back and gave his master a small bow. As you wish, my lord. But if I'm going to be fighting 3 warlords, I'll be needing to secure the talents of a certain warrior. Hideyoshi seemed as though he might deny the young man's request just to spite him, but even he could now recognize that if drastic measures weren't taken, the battle could well make it to his front doorstep. Not that they would be able to defeat him, of course. No one, not even that arrogant prick Nobunaga, would be able to defeat him. Who do you want? He finally asked as he turned away from his 2 advisors. The freelancer, Yoke, Hanbei answered. Her skills will see to the swift defeat of many of their forces. I think she might even be able to knock Greenleaf's leader off of his pedestal. No, Hideyoshi muttered, his eyes becoming distant. If she kills anyone of importance, it will be the boy sitting on Aurora's throne. What was his name again? Lord Keihatsu, Kanbei answered. He alone was responsible for my defeat at the border months ago. Now he seems to have rallied Lords Motochika and Motonari to his cause. No matter. Hideyoshi sniffed as he and Hanbei and the messenger departed the room. If they have all banded together, they can all die together. Then the southwest countries of Ransai will all finally belong to me, followed soon by the rest of the continent. A devious smile worked its way across his face as he stared up at his throne, where at the head a golden replica of the legendary Pokemon Reshiram sat. Your days are numbered, Nobunaga. So, let me see if I have this straight. Hanbei sighed to himself, knowing what was about to come, and also being aware that there was nothing he could do but accept it. Mustache Monkey, Lord Hideyoshi, Mustache Monkey, replied a girl a few years younger than him, kept throwing you and the ghost at Aurora and Greenleaf because he was too full of himself to bother with it in person, but neither of you could do your jobs, leading to the pushback of one very angry alliance who took over half of our country's territory before its rulers even heard about it, and now you need me to save the day like I did during that incident with Pugilis, because you are all a cavalcade of royal screw-ups. She paused to take a breath before asking, "Did I miss anything?" "No, that about sums it up," Hanbei admitted. "Good, that's great," the other warrior said with an overly bright smile that set Hanbei on edge. "And what exactly do I get out of this? Gonna make me your new warlord?" "Can't do that, the warlord's a monkey," Hanbei smirked, "but I'm sure he could be convinced to make you a regional governess over Aurora." The girl mused, her blue eyes sparkling with intrigue. "Governess, Yoke. It's a start." As she looked the junior warlord up and down, she added, "I do imagine you know that my ambitions don't end there, right?" "Hey, I follow whoever in Ignis lets me take the most naps." Hanbei shrugged. "Kanbei might need some convincing, but if Hideyoshi's reign is ready to topple over, I'll gladly give it a nudge, provided you're the one doing all the shoving when it comes down to it." "Good to know where we stand," Yoke said as she reached out and shook hands with her ally. "Now, let's go save Entei from the invaders before Hideyoshi rides out to take the credit."
All right, so feelings on this chapter?
I mean, there's some action, but I feel like it's kind of a segue chapter, to be honest. But there's good character development.
Segue how?
Like, I feel like it's a lapse in the action in a way.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting that you say that because, like, considering that the aim of this is to be more of a political drama than like a wartime story. You know, war certainly has to be a factor in it, but it's interesting that you call it a segue because you could almost consider the battles and the war itself to be a segue from
yeah, that's a good point.
From the
we have had
from the usual settings.
That makes sense.
So yeah, we have a little bit. I think my favorite thing about that opening bit is where Keihatsu's like telling his commanders, he's like, "Tell Motochika to do what I tell him, or I'm gonna put my foot up his backside." Like, I don't know what possessed me to write it that way, but I was just like, I feel like Motochika, like, is a great warrior, and I would even go so far as to call him a good commander. But I feel like one of the reasons that I didn't have him be like more at the business table or more at the like more of a presence at the meetings is because he's just so itching to get out there and punch somebody.
He's a very shoot first, ask questions later kind of personality.
Yeah, and it's fun, and he certainly has his time and place in the narrative. But being a major leader on a battlefield isn't exactly one of them.
Yeah, even though he's a warlord.
So like that's not to say that he has zero leadership capabilities. He's just not as how do you know where I think I got his attitude from? Is the Scandians from Ranger's Apprentice.
Oh yeah.
Like the Jarls have this tendency to be like their battle plan consists of everybody got your weapons, all right, cool, follow me. And then like everybody just follows the captain or whoever. Yeah. And it's like but it's interesting the way that John Flanagan wrote them because like they're not the brightest bunch, but when it comes to the good leaders, they're not stupid.
Yeah,
they just have a tendency to be a little bit. They don't look at the big picture as well.
It's more of a I'm good under pressure.
Yeah. It's like, sir, they have us surrounded. So what you're telling me is that we can attack in any direction.
Basically,
that's where Motochika thrives. Yeah. He couldn't be a warlord if he didn't have some leadership capabilities.
It's just a different leadership style.
Yeah, and he's not as thick as not as dense as Hideyoshi is. What was I gonna say? So there's that. So we kind of get our first look at Keihatsu, like we saw him at the skirmish, but that was him handling like handling like a few platoons.
Yeah.
This is like full on like regiments that he's commanding now. This is like a battle. This is a battle that engages hundreds, if not thousands, of troops, which is much bigger than what he did at the border. And I remember when I was starting to go into this chapter, I was kind of going back and forth. I was like, do I? There was this temptation to kind of like open it up, or open this segment up with like his first push into their territory, to like kind of see more through the eyes of the soldiers, because some of these soldiers, especially from Greenleaf, would have had this happening to them. But I was like, I felt like that would deviate a little too far from what the main from the main plot.
Yeah.
So I decided to scrap that. Like it happened, you know. I feel like it's one of those things that's a little better when it's implied, as opposed to going into too much detail with it.
That makes sense.
There's a lot of detail in this already, and I don't want to inundate the narrative with that.
Yeah. You need to stay on course.
I'm like, I want there to be details. I want it to be detailed enough to be interesting, so that people can, if they come back and read it.
Those are good thoughts that you can definitely apply later on if it works.
Yeah. It's like one of the things that I'm trying to work on, that I've certainly made a mistake of doing in the past, is I don't want to have a scene just because I like the idea of that scene on its own.
It has to
it's like there have been some scenes where it's like, this was really cool and this was really well written.
But why?
But I had to like line up so many things that went kind of out of the way just to get to that, to the point where it's like, yes, I enjoyed the payoff, but narrative-wise, it wasn't really worth it.
You just did it because you thought it would be cool, not because it really worked in the story.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we were just watching Kenobi.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that same thing, basically.
Yeah.
Because the writers were like, oh my gosh, what if we had this character that, like, survived the temple?
It's a great idea.
Yeah, but...
It was a great idea. It just was executed
it
poorly.
Fit well with the rest of the narrative.
Yeah.
It was like this random thing thrown into the narrative, and it didn't really work with the continuity. It was cool. I liked the idea.
It just didn't land right.
And I can't even remember her name, but Riva. I hated her the first time I watched it. I didn't hate it the second time I watched it, because I can see where the writers were going with it. That being said, I think she almost deserved a different story if it was going to be told. Yeah. Because I feel like
she would have been better done like in the Tales of the Empire kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because I don't know, it detracted from the point of Kenobi.
Vader's grudge match.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, yes, we can have somebody who's really powerful, and that gives us some power scaling, so we see, oh, this is how far out of everybody else's league.
Yeah, but you don't need an Inquisitor to do that for Vader.
Exactly.
Like, just that scene where he just yanks a ship out of the sky and grounds it. Like, that should tell you all you need to know.
For me, more than anything, like, I can see, like, to play devil's advocate, I can see the writers thinking, well, for people who don't know Star Wars, this gives them a little more intel into the emotional buy-in of what's going on. But for me, I'm just like, I don't know. Yeah. It doesn't work. Anyway, sorry. Totally sidetracked, but it's the same idea where you're adding something that is cool, but not necessarily pertinent to the story. Yeah.
It's Deadwood. So yeah, I wanted to avoid that, and these are long chapters as it is. So even like, it's such a weird balancing scale that I have to maintain, because it's like I don't have a problem with a long story, but it has to be divided into chunks that people can palate. It's like people can read these in installments and not like start zoning out because each individual segment is so freaking long. Yeah, and then all of a sudden you have all these side characters and you're like, wait a minute, who is this again? I have to go back and look at my notes. Yeah, and like, people may be able to accuse me of throwing in too many side characters in this, but it's like, I'm not necessarily trying to have people super invested into all these characters that are being named. Some of them are just there for a scene. Some of them will serve a purpose as a plot point in the story, and then maybe they'll get mentioned once or twice later. Like, I'm trying to do it so that any character that's by name doesn't completely fade out. Like they kind of come back in every now and again, but none of those characters should be like turning plot points.
Yeah.
It's like the story shouldn't revolve around them returning or some such.
This is not Brothers Karamazov where you have to sit there and take notes on all the characters.
Or the Silmarillion.
Or, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But all that to say, you know, we did get to see some familiar faces, like one of Keihatsu's Capitol guards, one of the guys that goes with him when he goes into town. He asked to be assigned to his protection unit, so we see him doing that. They're kind of talking, and then we get to see another bit of Keihatsu's father's legacy that he's not really thrilled about, and he's trying to do what he can to make that right.
Yeah.
Because again, Keihatsu is meant to be like the servant king.
Yeah.
And I really am enjoying getting to write this kind of character. What else? So we have them going into the city. What did you think of the surrender scene? Like where the commander's like trying to keep his troops rallied and, you know, make the last stand kind of thing, and everybody's just kind of looking at him like, we're not going to win this.
It's reminding me of something, and I'm having a hard time putting my finger on it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it works, because you've got this kind of a-hole commander who's full of himself. He's got all this pride, and he doesn't want to... He's putting his pride before his soldiers. And the soldiers see that, and they're like, you know, this is just your ego, man. We want to live to see another day. Our king kind of sucks anyway, so, I mean, why are we fighting this war? We want to live. These guys don't seem that bad, you know? And so, the soldiers, they know they've been beaten, but he just can't let it go, because that's probably, you know, I peaked in cadet school, and I got this promotion because my buddy got in trouble for slacking off, and I got to show off, right?
The monologue that Keihatsu delivers about there being two kinds of leaders in the world, you know, the ones that lead from the front lines and the ones that hide behind the strengths of their troops and then call it their own.
Yes, he embodies that for sure.
Like, and in writing that, I honestly tried to draw on what leadership, like the different kinds of leadership that has been shown to me throughout my life.
I like that.
So I'm like, this is what I've seen, is that there are those two kinds of leaders. And, you know, you get one kind where the soldiers or the people are willing to follow them. And the others, they follow them because that's just orders. Right? And so what kind of leader do you want to be?
Yeah.
So I'm I guess I'm patting myself on the back a little bit, but I'm particularly proud of that bit. And then, I've been reminded in past works, it's like, okay, if you're going to load Chekhov's gun, you need to have it ready to fire. So that's what I did with the troops that led the surrender. Like, that guy wasn't shown by name. I didn't pick him out during the skirmish chapter. I think it was chapter 3. But he was there. And he saw what happened. And that was enough to give credence to him saying, this is why we should surrender.
Yeah, and I like it, though, because, I mean, but then you have this person who's not necessarily in this high leadership position, but he is doing the right thing and saying what needs to be said. To say, no, you don't need to be, I mean, even reassuring them, like, you don't have to feel
it's
bad.
Like, he keeps better than his word.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to be afraid. Like, we've been beaten.
If we have to lose, it should be to this guy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, like he gives a whole bit where he's like, I'm not happy that we lost. He's like, I'm not glad to see you all here, but if I had to lose, at least it was to you guys.
He's a man of his word.
Yeah, which is more than he can say for his own warlord.
Exactly.
What'd you think of the bit with Keihatsu and Oichi? Talk like they're like kind. It's like that's as close as they can get to a date right now.
Yeah.
It's like, how sad is that he has to come in burnt and bones broken, and she has to act as his healer.
That was so life, though. Like,
yeah.
Honestly, and I think it was cute because, like, as someone who's been married, dating for 14 years and married for 8 or 7. I don't even know, 7. Something
7.
like that.
We're coming up on 7 here.
Yeah.
No, wait, we
coming
just
up
passed
on 8.
7.
We passed 7.
We
Okay.
passed 7.
But I mean, it just like it reminds me of like early dating and like, oh yeah, this is how life's gonna be. Like, you're gonna do this, and I'm just gonna tag along. And I'm like, oh, that's cute that you think that.
Yep.
But just keep thinking that you're just
Oh
always
yeah.
gonna be together.
Oh yeah. I'm writing that
like,
full. I'm writing that full on cackling because I'm like, it's cute that you think
Yeah,
that.
because it's like life. Like, you know, you may think that you're always just going to go to work with your husband, but, like, stuff comes up, and you can still support him even if you're doing something different for a little while.
Yep.
Like, it's okay, honey.
Yep.
Like, I get it. You're not even in the honeymoon stage yet, 'cause you're not even married yet. But we're still Twitter-pated, and we just want to be together 24/7.
Well, I mean, they
got it.
like,
It's
and to put it in their perspective, like they give each other genuine happiness, which neither of them has had for quite some time.
Also, this is wartime. They never know if it's the last time they're going to see each other.
Yep.
I get it. I'd be super clingy with you too. So, I mean, that's not to say that I don't want to be with you all the time, because, you know, we can smother each other sometimes because we're just both very clingy, and that is okay. That's just our relationship. But we also both have our own passions that we pursue, and we are comfortable enough.
And
in our
sometimes
own
I just
skin.
drag you into mine.
Yeah, exactly. And so but we're comfortable in our own skin, so we're like, okay, honey, I love you, and I trust you that I'm gonna see you later. I have confidence that I'm gonna see you later, right? Because we've been together long enough that we have that confidence in one another. And these guys, like, it's new. It's like, I can't let go, like, never let go, right?
Yep.
So, you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's cute. It works for their stage in life.
Yeah, and like, it's very difficult for me writing this, like not necessarily writing the content itself, but remembering to maintain the continuity when it comes to their dynamic. Because I'm just like me, I'm like I love seeing people have happy endings.
Oh, yeah.
Like I love seeing that. But they're not
you guys hadn't noticed.
Yeah, but they're not there yet. Like, they're on their way, but they're not there yet. And like they're like in terms of timeline, they're kind of early on their way to the happy ending, or what they think is going to be the happy ending, for lack of a better term. So it's like I have to remember, like, these are kids. These are like not kids, but like,
yeah, they're teenagers.
They're teenagers. This is, like you said, this is all very new for them. They're enjoying themselves. Like, they're definitely putting more thought into their future than a lot of people their age would be.
But they're also in a position that most people their age are not.
Yes.
So.
Yes. So there's pros and cons to it.
You know, we also kind of have the mysterious past of Miss Oichi. And
yeah.
So I'm not going to give anything away, but I mean, even as a reader, you can say, well, I mean, she's adapting to this rather well, don't you think? So it's just like, you know, you can think about, okay, well, maybe there's something about who she is and what her past life was like that is kind of contributing to the way she's behaving right now.
He's pretty much figured out that she's nobility of some sort, and like I don't know if you remember, like there was kind of a moment where like it seemed like she might tell him something, but he was like, "Look, I'm not going to ask you to explain things to me if you don't want to."
Yeah.
And you know that's been that so far,
which is like so unrelatable because I'm over here like, give me the chisme. Dímelo.
Well, I mean, I'm the same. I'm the same way. I'd want to know, but. Again, I'm trying to make an effort to make characters who are not like me.
Not everyone just wants to crawl inside of each other's skin and know the whole brain. So there's some people who...
Why did you have to put it like that?
But I mean, that's...
Why?
Tell me I'm wrong.
Why?
Tell me I'm wrong.
I don't want to. These guys accuse me of lying often enough. But, yeah. They're being cute. They're I was like, honestly, like, with the way that their dynamic has been going, like, after I went back and looked at the chapter while I was editing it, I was like, wow, there really isn't a whole lot of screen time with them together in this chapter. Like, it's very low, but I'm like, I don't need to change that. I don't need to change that.
It would be too much.
Yeah, but again, like, I don't need to change that. Like, this is where the story's at this point. It doesn't have room for that, for too much of that. So, yeah, I had fun with it. I was gonna say, what did you think of the bit where they're trying to they're strategizing? It's like, okay, how do we finish? It's like, okay, we're kind of starting to reach the closing act of this, or like the closing act of this campaign is on the horizon. Like, it's not here yet. We're not there yet. We're not in the final stage yet. But we're starting to see, like, okay, this is the direction we need to take. Except we might need to take this direction.
Yeah, so I mean, it makes sense, because I mean, with any campaign, it's not just point A to point B. Every civilization is complex. And so it makes sense that they're having to say, okay, do we make it clean and make sure we're covering all our bases, or do we rush through to the end and just take over, you know?
Well, the problem is that if they try to clean it all the way through, for lack of a better term, they
burn through their resources for one.
Yeah, they stand to lose more than they would gain is the problem.
Yeah. Problem is, though, if they burn through, then, you know, who's to say that they're not going to get overrun after getting a thin
They're going to end up in a pincer attack, in a pincer maneuver.
Exactly.
You never want to be in that position.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I made a joke about, I made the joke, it's like, okay, so you're telling me we can fire in any direction. Yeah, that's true, but that's not a good place to be in. That is a really bad place to be in.
Nope. Yep. Sorry.
It's all good. And then you had a take on the new character that was introduced.
Yeah, I like her. We got a girl with some ambition, a little spicy, and you know, we know it's a Pokemon story. It's a, you know, so you never know like where someone's gonna be, and I mean,
yeah,
I think she's sounding pretty interesting. I can't give too much away because she's definitely.
Did she end up being more interesting than you thought she was going to be initially,
yes.
or was it like kind of in the ballpark?
I think initially I actually kind of disliked her, obviously, because she's on the wrong side. But I'm interested in seeing how you draw her, because I've seen little pieces of her face, but I'm getting like punk rock Sabine princess vibes,
That's
right?
funny. I'm
just like Mandalorian warrior girl, let's go, right?
That's
the vibe I get from the way she talks. She's just kind of a go-getter. Meanwhile, we got Lazy
a little bit, yeah.
Where she go-getter hanging out with Lazy Boy.
Without spoiling anything, like her attitude and like the way that she was raised was definitely inspired by Mandalorian culture.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a good guess.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Okay, I wasn't sure, but that's because that's what it was making me think of, at least.
That's funny. Nice. I thought I had told you that.
I don't think we talked about that.
Oh, okay. I think that's pretty much.
I feel like I would remember, because you know me.
Fair
Sabine's
enough.
one of my favorite characters.
Like
so.
it's she's not based on Sabine directly. It's just like the Mando the Mando culture. Yeah. This is the way. I think that's it from my notes. Like I'm. How do I put this? Like not a whole lot in particular stood out in a narrative sense. Like you said, like this felt a little bit like a segue chapter. I'm not saying it's a weak chapter, but I'm particularly proud of like a couple of the dialogues that happened. But like in terms of like things happening to move the plot along, there was like it's keeping the plot going, but like nothing major is happening in this chapter.
Nothing earth-shattering. We're just kind of keeping the story moving gradually.
Yeah, like sometimes segues are necessary, because if I had just gone from them starting the coalition to them attacking the capital, that's way too much skipped.
Yeah,
like there needs to be some bridge.
Absolutely.
So I hope this wasn't too boring.
No. I thought it was good.
Okay.
And I think I forget sometimes that you're working on a different genre. That's why I was like, this is tame for you. There's not people dying everywhere.
I mean, there are people dying, but I'm not on screen, and like I'm not going into excruciating detail over it, because like I get, because so here's another big difference between this and the border skirmish. It's like at the border skirmish there was time to be a little more intimate with it.
Yeah.
Because it was a smaller scale, there was more time to take a look at all the people who
there
are more voices to be heard. Now it's like, I hate the fact that I'm about to quote this, and I hate the fact that I'm about to quote Stalin, but he had a point when he said 1 death is a tragedy, 1 million is just a statistic, or it's just a number, I believe is the.
That's dark.
You never heard that quote?
I've never heard that before.
Yep. he had that to say about his regime. As again, I hate that like that's what I'm drawing this to, but as macabre as it is,
emotional weight that you can put on it before it becomes like too depressing to keep going.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like as macabre as it sounds, like there is a cold truth to that. It's like when you see just so much death, you just have to find a way to move past it because like if you break down and cry over every single person that you lose in a battle, the enemy is going to shoot you while you're busy throwing a pity party.
Yeah,
like you just don't have time for that. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Is that about it for this chapter?
I think that's it for this chapter. So, we're recording this like when we're supposed to be recording for the Your Hero chapters. So, we'll see what the next couple weeks bring. But thanks guys so much
we'll do our best to get back on schedule.
Yeah. It's a struggle. As I was saying, thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed this chapter, and I hope you're enjoying the story and just our shenanigans in the middle of all of it. So we'll catch you guys for the next one. Enjoy your weeks until then.